Okay, ladies, gentlemen, and everybody else. This is a Carvin VTR2800 guitar amplifier. It is a 100-watt head from 1976. It's had a busy life, as the logo that would normally appear here does not, and a lot of the things that once appeared here don't appear here. There's a piece of tape here. I'm not sure what to make of it. Cosmetics on this, I don't know that I can really fix that and recreate that graphic. I mean, I've seen some pictures, but I think we're just going to try to get everything working correctly. From what I understand, the reverb doesn't work. One of the channels kind of cuts in and out, and from an email before, I guess when it cuts out, if you bopped it on the top, it came back. So, who knows what we're dealing with. It looks like it has a quad of EL34s. The writing on the back of the writing on the back of the tubes or on the tubes is kind of AWOL, but they certainly look like EL34s, and I should be able to verify that because I figured out it was 1976 by pulling a catalog page, so we're good there. So we've got it on standby, RMS voltage at full. I've got an 8 ohm sacrificial speaker, and we'll turn it on and see if the tubes warm up. Go back here and look. Interesting that we have a 7 band EQ. That sure beats a 3-knob tone stack, huh? Alright, now this allegedly being 100 watts, this could potentially blow my face off, so I'm going to turn the volume really low. And we just switched on the B+ voltage, and I can hear a little bit of sizzly in my sacrificial speaker. I've got quite a bit of crackle and fizz there. Now, it's also amplifying okay. There's our normal channel. Okay, I can hear when I turn the reverb up, that makes noise. So that either means the reverb tank is not being driven or something, because it's trying to pick it up. Let me rap on it a little bit. Okay. When I put my finger on the reverb tank, it's whistling. So that says to me there might be some kind of funky ground issue. There's a little ground flip switch here. I don't know what that does, but it doesn't seem to do much. I've got that reverb's like picking up a ball of noise, so I wonder if that's just clunkily attached in there. We're going to figure that out. Okay. So the reverb just seems to be a big noise bucket. The normal channel seems to be alive and well, and there's plenty of power in that. That's barely working. Fizzy and kind of working. So everything is kind of trying to work. Now that it's been on for a minute, it has kind of shut up, so it might have just needed the tubes to warm up. Let's check the sustain or drive channel, I guess. So there's the volume for said channel. Okay, so that's playing ball, and the reverb is still the same kind of wreck that it was. And then if we come to 1 and 2, let's get this channel quiet and bring that one in on top. Okay, so I think in general the amp wants to work, which is a good start. And now that it's had a minute to warm up, the background noise has had a chance to minimize, so that's good. We're going to need to test the tubes, figure out why this reverb makes nothing but noise, and then when I touch it, that's my finger on the tank. That's just placing my finger on the outside of the tank. That's weird. I think we'll troubleshoot this in real time. I want to turn that volume way down. Okay, that's quiet now. I would think that one of these connectors going up to the reverb tank is loose or poorly connected, and of course there is like no way for me to get fingers in there to, there's a little bit, got a little wiggle on that one. Oh, our power transformer here says December 1977, so apparently this was the second year of production for this model amplifier. Okay, and here's the other RCA on the reverb here, and that feels really, really crusty, and I can't really turn or twist it. I don't know. Let's see if that made our reverb any better or not, just adjusting and fiddling with those connectors. Yes, so that's a good thing. Our reverb tank is alive, and it looks like we just had a really crappy connection in there. So it's looking brighter and brighter for this amplifier. Let's give a little tap test on our tubes here while we're in here and see if we've got a real clunker. Need to turn the volume up a bit for that. Let's see. Put our volumes up at about half. That should be adequate. Nothing interesting. Nothing interesting. Nothing interesting. It's good. Reverb works. I see one preamp tube. I only see one preamp tube. That doesn't make sense, but maybe there is only one preamp tube, but I only see one. Again, I don't have a schematic for this yet, so I don't know. Power transformer, output transformer are still ice cold, but I haven't been rocking. So at this point, things look pretty good. The noise floor is not too bad. If I turn down everything here, let's see. Yeah, if I turn down everything, our speaker really doesn't have too much of a hum to it. Our capacitors here are not flaming hot, but that doesn't mean they won't be a leaky mess when we go in there. But I doubt it. I don't think they're fresh as a wind-driven snow here, but you know, I don't know that it really is going to be required. Yes, these are 40-year-old capacitors. Yes, a bunch of people are going to go, oh my gosh, da, 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 da. And it is obviously worth considering replacing 40-year-old capacitors. But at the same time, with a lot of these amps and a lot of the folks that we work with and deal with and whatever, we try to get just the amp working well enough, just get the kinks out of it so you can play it, and then decide if it's your favorite amp of all time before we go in and really, really try to restore it. Because, nothing's worse than spending big dollars on a full restoration and then finding out this amp is not your style. So, yeah, so let's break into it. I think just these tubes probably, I don't know how many miles they have on them, but I would like to test our power tubes and our preamp tube and see how we are there, and then we'll pull the chassis and have a look inside. Okay, I did find some writing on these tubes that indicates that they are EL34s. They sure looked like them, and I was assuming that's what it would be. I mean, a quad of them would equal what we would consider a 100-watt amp in most cases. So we turn on our tester, tune it to EL34, aka 6CA7, and we press the OK button and we wait for the magic to happen. The orange tester here, I use this on a lot of guitar amps because it's a lot less fidgety than using the ICO tester, which I have to use in some cases because this tests a limited number of tubes, generally those associated with current production hi-fi amplifiers and current production type guitar amplifiers. But I find this one's a little bit more sensitive, and it will fail some tubes for reasons that I fail to grasp, where a lot of tubes will still pass the ICO and they'll still work, but if the tubes pass these orange units and I do put them in equipment, they very rarely explode, so that's a good thing. So essentially what you do is you just pick your tube, press OK, and you wait for it to count down. And we're going to be doing this another 4 times with the other tubes. We'll see if there's anything interesting at all to report with at least one tube, and then we'll test the rest of them off camera. Okay, that test is a 9. That's a very good value. New tubes off the hop generally test, generally between 8 and 11. So 9 is a very respectable number, and that indicates that this tube still has a lot of life to give. So, time to check the others. Okay, tube number 2 tests as an 8. So not quite as strong as the first one, but still well within the usable range. So now we're on to the third tube. Okay, so this is the third tube and we're testing it right now. The one thing I think is kind of interesting about this tube is the getter compound that's on there, which is essentially the sort of silvery hat that these tubes have. This one's a little smaller and it's kind of off to the side. It doesn't really mean anything. Usually these chrome domes, when they turn white, that's when you have to worry. Or they kind of fade or whatever. This one looks like they just maybe used a little bit less and didn't put it in the center. But yeah, if this tube gives us any guff, we'll talk about it, but I don't think that we need to just film the tube tester running and running. Is this like relaxing to anybody? Well, there you go. So tube number 3 tests only as a 4, which is worn, very worn. So that's a bummer. Let's keep going. Okay, and tube number 4 tests as a 9, so it's very strong. So we had like 1 weak tube out of 4. And the only preamp tube that I saw at least hanging down, maybe if there's other ones there inside, is a 12AT7 USA. It says 6201. That looks like General Electric writing to me. So this would be a General Electric military tube. And we'll give that a test. So we'll turn our tube tester on. We're going to come over to 12AT7 and give that an OK. And testing these preamp tubes actually goes faster than testing the power tubes. And it tests both triodes at the same time, which is great. It's a lot more convenient than the traditional tube checker. Probably not as advanced as some people's tube testers, but I think this gets the job done. And as you can see, our GE actually tests perfectly balanced with both triodes at a 9. That's a perfect tube for a phase inverter. And it's a 12AT7. I think it's a phase inverter. Maybe it's a reverb driver. Is this a hybrid solid state amp? I don't know. I'll go pull a schematic and then we'll find out. Okay, so we're in. I pulled the chassis here and we're taking a look around. This is kind of like a Peavey in that it's like a Heritage where you have a solid state front end and then you have tubes on the back end. So, like a Heritage in that respect. Orange drop caps, lots of them, fine. Our caps here are Rubicon, generally pretty good quality. Somebody did the 3-prong cord over here, which is fine, but this ground switch, all it does is move the death cap back and forth. This death cap, that should have been snipped. This switch should become moot, so we'll do that. And the only weird thing I found is these two. These are 220 microfarad 50 volt capacitors, and I can just wiggle that thing around the board like there's no tomorrow. Like it's not even soldered down, or maybe it's blown up inside and the leads are jiggling around. I don't know, but that might go along with the theory that, you know, you had to give it a little love tap to wake it back up. The other thing that's kind of strange is this little cluster here. I'm gonna guess that somebody didn't have the right cap, so they paralleled two caps together. Or we're trying to make a non-polar or something to go here. These are newer caps and they're series together, excuse me. This looks like a newer Sprague Atom, but I need to tip this board up and at least get a gist of what's going on with those two. Okay, so we just learned something the backwards way. This board only has soldering on the top side. There are no pads on the bottom side. So these capacitors, the weight of them wiggling around, caused those solder joints to break. The capacitor tests with relatively low voltage loss and low ESR, so it's a little old. It's not the world's greatest capacitor at this point, but it and its mate have just become cracked solder joints. In the process of trying to unscrew this board, one of the stupid little bolts snapped. So, and I can't believe they're flathead. So we'll go into the cabinet of hardware and replace our bolt that we screwed up. Oops, yes, even I screw up. Well, no I don't. I always do it perfect, but that's the miracle of camera editing. You didn't see it. So I think I should be able to get this back in the board, and then we're going to resolder that one and this one, and screw that board back down and pretend we never saw it. Okay, so we're back. I suppose this is why you have to have a high threshold of pain to enjoy working on amplifiers. What we discovered by removing the screws from the board and lifting it up so we could see on the other side is that there are only traces on the top side of the board, which is kind of a drag because we had to resolder these caps, which are not bad yet. But in the process of trying to unscrew this board, we managed to break a screw, which I was able to find an identical machine screw in my stash of stuff, which is good. But, you know, it's just a waste of a lot of time, and on top of that, there's just no way to solder radial capacitors at the top of the board and make them look nice. So, yeah, great. So that's okay. And considering that the ESR on these was really low, you know, these blue Rubicons, they're probably okay. This death cap way over here, you know, that when whoever installed the 3-wire cord, which they did fine, no problems there. This should just go, and we don't actually have to do anything with it. We can just clip it and tuck it away, so it can't hurt anything, because it can't really do anything other than touch ground, which it's already to ground, so that's good. Don't need to mess with that. And if somebody really wants to go back to 2-prong, they can stick that back on, but no. So that's good there. We do have tubes coming in. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna try to pull some manuals on this. I'm pretty certain that this is our bias pot, and I'm curious if we have any cathode resistors to easily measure current with, or if we're going to be doing this, you know, old school. Regardless, we'll figure it out, because that's what we do here on this channel. We're tough. But now we have to do the traditional cleaning of the potentiometers. Yay! This board is kind of wacky too. These three pots, 1, 2, 3, hold the board up to the face, and then this fourth one, which is the reverb pot, appears to not do that. It's hooked to wires that go back to the board, but you know what, it might be maybe somebody changed the reverb pot at a later date. I think they did. Maybe they changed the reverb pot, because yeah, this is a different reverb pot, so somebody's been in here. We ain't the first monkey in this jungle, my friends, but it's okay. I don't like that paralleling of caps, but you know, sometimes you do what you got to do, and I'm trying to fix what is in need of help and not screwing around with things that are not in need of help. Was this the reverb pot, or which pot was this? This was the first gain pot. That's been changed. Oh man, that just loosened that up big time. That thing was getting stiff as a board. This is the amazing magic sauce known as Max Pro Electronics Lubricant. I am a dealer. I sell this stuff. You heard it from me. Other YouTubers have been telling you to go buy it from Amazon. Thanks, you little weasel. You learned it from me. Just give me some credit, you little weasel. Anyway, alright, I don't know if I got much in there because it didn't. Oh yeah, it's already loosening up. Some of these pots are really easy to get this stuff into, where they have kind of like, you know, a lot of little slots and things to get into, and then other ones you can only go in through where the wires go in, and it's sometimes a pain in the keister. Or, since this is a Carvin, we'll say it's a pain in the keysel. Ha! I made a funny. Not really. Alright, so I think we're good. We're going to clean pots, and then I'll see you when we get some tubes in. Okay, just a little bit of exposition on this, because I think it might need some explaining. This little pot can give you a little bit of an adjustment swing on the bias, you know, whether you want to increase or decrease. They have a factory recommended, you know, voltage levels and all that kind of stuff, so we're just going to follow that because that's how we do things around here. I don't consider myself an electrical engineer, so I don't really re-engineer anybody's circuits. We just go with what the book says to do and call it good. But these two electrolytic capacitors, which had become desoldered and were bouncing around, those are what filters the bias. That's actually what makes the bias nice and smooth and nice and happy. So, considering that those had become desoldered from the board, or were just hanging on by a thread, that could cause the bias to run wild, and that could cook a tube, which may explain why one of our 4 tubes was cooked. So I've got those down very, very securely, and I have fired it up without the tubes in it and been staring at it for a while, and I checked a lot of voltages, and our bias voltage looks fine. Loaded, it'll probably change a little bit because it's showing, allegedly, according to the book, we're supposed to see 480 anode or plate volts here on the tubes, and it's showing about 515 or so, but that's with no load. You put 4 tubes in it, that's going to draw that down. So yeah, that's where we're at. So I think we'll be okay. I mean, I'm trying to deal with the issues that are here at hand, and here's somebody to call and criticize me some more. Okay, so we are back a day later here. Actually, what, a day or a day and a half or 2 days or something later anyway. And we have tubes. We have 4 brand new Electro-Harmonix EL34s. Fortunately for me, recently we have a tube dealer that has, they're in northern Ohio. They tend to cater more to the high fidelity type tubes, but a lot of those do cross over into the guitar amp realm. So I'm able to get quality vacuum tubes from companies like Tongue Sol and Electro-Harmonix, and I think they have the high-end stuff like the Genelex and the Mullard, as well as some of the Chinese tubes. and they're all pretty affordable, and he's close to home. So being close to home means that I only have to wait a day in the post as opposed to several days in the post. Now, prior to just plugging these in and turning them on, I have gone through and checked the voltages that were supposed to be in this amp to the schematic, and I have monitored that the bias is there and on and all of that stuff, so we're not just plugging in tubes and flipping a switch and seeing what happens, because that would not be all that bright to do. Our preamp tube tested out beautifully. My guess is that possibly with those capacitors loose, the bias may have been fluctuating, and or based on what the top cap looked like on the one tube that was weak, it may have just seeped air from, you know, age or whatever. So there's our 4 electro harmonics tubes plugged in good, and now we kick the tires and light the fires and see what happens. So our amp's plugged in, our B plus voltage is on standby now, and here we go. So we just flipped it on. I can see the filaments lighting up in all of our tubes. There we go. This one seems to have taken just a smidge longer to come to a good glow, but you know, the elements in these are all, a lot of these are hand wound and hand put together or machine, and when they're soldered, some are a millimeter higher or lower, so they don't always glow identically. And we have all of our volumes turned to nothing, which is fine. And I have my speaker hooked up, which is an 8 ohm speaker load. And now we turn on the B plus voltage. And now the amplifier should be on and amplifying. So I suppose I should get a cable and give it something to amplify. I'm going to give you a minute there. You watch and make sure none of those tubes are red plating. I'll turn the brighter light off there so you can make sure that they're okay for me. The output at the speaker is almost nothing, which is great because the volume's turned down. So we shouldn't really have any sound there, any hum or anything like that. You know, these are older capacitors, but I think they're fine. Everything tested okay. There's our normal channel turned up a bit. We have sound there, and I'm plugged into the 1 and 2, so I have both. And there's our drive channel. So we're okay on those 2 channels. This amp is working great. You know, I don't have crazy noise or anything weird like that, and then if I turn up the reverb, one of these 2 is going to be the return. That's the return right there, and I get sound from that. So she be working. I intend to recheck the voltages. The schematic specifies what voltages you want to see on the pins of your EL34s there. It's set to a pretty modest bias, and they're pulling 100 watts out of a quad of EL34, so that's fairly modest. I don't think this amp is going to beat these tubes up in any way, shape, or form. So now we just need to kind of let her bake for a little while and give our cabinet a little tidy up, and I think we will be good to go. Okay people, I swear to you the reverb worked when I tested it after just wiggling the cables, but after I put the amp back together it didn't again. And the black wire that goes onto that little transformer is disconnected. There is a teeny tiny microscopic little wire I can probably solder to, and we're going to try that. Lucky me. Okay, so we're back with our 1977 Carvin VTX2800. The things that we did are changed. I cut the death cap out, so this ground switch doesn't do anything anymore, which is just fine by me. I had to resolder a broken wire in the reverb tank. I had to resolder disconnected capacitors on that center-mounted power supply board that supplies the bias and stuff like that. And then did some other, pot cleaning and general checkup health kind of stuff. So I have it plugged into a nice noisy guitar. The Rickenbacker is noisy, but the amp itself is just whisper quiet, which is great. We have brand new Electro Harmonix EL34 power tubes, because one of the 4 power tubes had puked. It hadn't totally puked, it hadn't shorted or anything, but it was outputting low, which is a bummer because the others were outputting fine. So it could either have been a defect, or with the loose capacitors in that bias circuit, that could have definitely caused it to do some weird and wacky things. So I'm plugged into the channel 1 and 2, so I should have some distortion and some clean and some reverb and some everything. So we're just gonna turn our guitar on here, plug in our guitar, and our poor sacrificial speaker here is probably falling apart with the amount of bass that I'm pouring into it. Something rattling around on the cone, or has the cone got a cut in it? We need a proper speaker. This is why we're using a junk speaker here, people. It's very loud. Let's turn it down a little bit so we're not fizzing and fuzzing our speaker. Let's try just the drive channel here. That's all just the speaker farting itself out. We'll go to the normal channel here. Should be clean. I think we should get the not broken speaker. What do you think? Okay, so I went and got the other one of my sacrificial speakers. These are some old Utah-made drivers that were made for Radio Shack probably sometime in the 70s, and I got them at a garage sale for like 10 bucks. So that's the normal channel. That's supposed to be clean and happy, and it sounds clean and happy. And the reverb springs in there are a little loose with age, but every time I bump the head, it you can hear the reverb working. And there's the sustain channel. So, there we go. That's plenty loud for a single speaker that's out of the cabinet. If I turn off the guitar, we experience the sound of silence. The amp itself makes almost no noise. I did check the EQs, those are working. All is well, man. All is well. So Carvin VTX2800 is officially more better than it was when it got here. Sound-wise, it's a solid-state front end. It's a tube back end. Kind of like the Peavey Heritage VTX we had. I think we had a classic VTX and a Heritage VTX in here that were that way. The Peaveys were using 6L6s and just driving the bejesus out of them to get that kind of wattage. Carvin put a more robust tube in there with the EL34 and is driving them more conservatively. So I think this design would make your tubes last longer. And yeah, so let's just see if the reverb surfs, because that's like one of the questions we always have to ask ourselves, right? Does it surf? I bet this one surfs. Oh yes, and there's still more to go. Oh yes, that's a very surfy reverb. So that question's answered. I'm going to call it good. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I know we probably skipped a few things, but essentially we covered everything that we did at the end, right? I know, my filming is getting rough, but I got to clean up my workshop and move on to another project. Have a great day.